Alright, welcome back. Yes, I've been a bit MIA lately, sorry about that. I broke the tibia in my leg, so I've been a bit out of action in the shed, haven't been posting as much, but I'm all good now. Hopefully I get at least 3 videos out in the next few weeks, so we will be pumping out the content. In this video, I wanted to do something a bit different. I went into so much depth on this exhaust. I wanted to do an exhaust specific video where we just go through and fabricate a custom exhaust like this. And then next week, I'll put out the whole video of this bike, complete fabrication, start to finish, and then we'll go for a rip at the end of it. So basically, in this video, I want to go through this complete exhaust fabrication, like start to finish. I explain every step, explain what you need to go through along the way, what you need to take in consideration, everything you need to know and do to fabricate an exhaust like this in your shed. So basically, if you want to do this the easier way, you can just buy all these stainless steel bends and then cut them and section them and make an exhaust like this. But if you want to do it the hard way like I did, I even show you how to fabricate these large radius bends from scratch. So if that's something you're interested in, stick around, and then at the end of the video, we'll start this thing up and go for a rip. All right, let's talk exhausts and bikes here. So I've spoken about the funky little exhaust I want to do. Now I've just got a bike in that I can show you a bit more in detail what I was talking about. So with Freddie's bike here, he just wanted a big sweeping bend out the rear exhaust, right? And this little panhead over here, I just happened to get in for some work, has exactly that. See how it's got this nice big sweeper that goes into the rear pipe there? If anyone's wondering, this is a Small City Cycles bike. It was a Born Free build. It's over here in Australia now. One of my buddies down south owns it. So pretty cool little thing this. It's got a super cool VL front end, tiny little fucking drum brake, and basically all the gear. It's just in for some wiring and there's some engine issues that I've got to deal with. But this is a perfect bike to show example of what I'm going for. So this big sweeper out of here is what I'm going for. So when I do it, usually I do it with these little pieces. So I just cut these up, put a heap together, and then I polish the welds out so you don't see it. But he wants a big sweeper like this. So I can show you on Ben's bike how it usually looks. So that's with the tight bends how it usually comes out. So Freddie wanted a bit bigger than that. So the way I'm going to do this, as I said, is on my bender. So this is going to be the radius the pipe will be. So this is what it usually is. That's what it's going to be. So it's going to be a huge radius. So I'm going to do all the bends in the exhaust with that large radius. So they look like just nice, big, sweeping pipes. So I'm going to fill this with sand. So I've got some of Maroochydor's finest here. I went to the beach, got myself some sand. So I'm going to fill this pipe with sand. So I'm going to cap one end. I'm going to weld it up, cap it. And then I'm going to fill it with sand. And on the other end, I'm going to weld on a little device with a screw that pushes pressure on the sand in the tube. So the idea of that is the tube is forced into its form. And then when I'm bending it, it's not going to want to deform. It's going to keep its shape. All right, so let's go through what we're working with to seal this bit of pipe up. And as I'm sure I've already mentioned, we're going to fill it full of sand. And I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on the sand to try and keep the form of this bit of pipe when we bend it. I've already showed you before when there's no sand in this pipe, it just takes whatever shape it wants because there's nothing holding it in its form. So what I have here is a 1 meter of 3/16 stainless steel pipe. So you could do this with any size, but I'm doing this with just the normal exhaust size. So this is 1 3/4 pipe. So I always go with the 3/16 because they do say that you only need to use 3/16 when you're in a marine setting. So when it's got salt water or something around, they say the 304 would be fine. But in my experience, I've had 304 corrode and go rusty because I think the heat affects it. So you get a bit of heat that affects it, and then a bit of oil here and there and other bits, contaminants, and you know, you have to take the pipe off again and polish it, and then put it back on, and then after a while it does the same thing. So if you're going through this much effort, just spend the extra money and get the 316. Like, you could cut this exhaust up infinite amount of times and make another one. Like, the material is that good. It's not just throw away when you want a new exhaust. Cut the pieces you want out of it and make a new exhaust out of it. Anyway, so the bits I'm going to need for this is I'm going to need a cap for the end. So I just cut a little bit of whatever 1.6 mil plate just to weld on the end as a cap. And then on the other end, I machined up a little piston so that fits in there nice and snug so that sand can't get around it. This sort of is what compresses the sand and keeps it really tight down the bottom in the place that you're bending it. And then this is what I just weld to the top, and then this has got a thread so that I can put pressure on the piston. Now this is just a clutch hub puller that I made that I've repurposed to do this. So once I'm done doing this, I'll just face this off in the lathe and it'll be brand new again. So instead of having to make this, I've just repurposed it for now. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to weld the cap on the end, and then I'm going to fill it full of sand, and then we'll come back and we'll put the piston in and then weld this guy on the top. All right, so I have my cap on there nicely now. I ground all the sides flush like that just because my die has this end that holds the pipe, and that has to be the right size like that. Otherwise, it doesn't go through. So that's why I just put a cap on the end. If you're bending it differently, it doesn't matter if you just put a flat plate on the end that protrudes. So basically, this is the idea of it. You jam it in there, and then I've made it a meter so that I've got some leverage to pull that on. But you really shouldn't have to force this. You want the heat to do all the work. So I'm going to go through now and fill this thing up with sand so that we can put the piston and the top bit on. So I've just got my little Woolies bag here full of Maroochydor's finest. This darker sand is sand that I've already used. It's funny, it like burns the sand. Not surprising, really. Anyway, I'll go through, fill this thing up, and then we'll put the top on. Alright, so I have this thing full of sand now. It's all the way to the top. So now I'm going to put my little piston in there, just like that. And then we just give this a little tap just below the surface, just like that. And then I'm just going to put it in the vise and then weld this top piece on. So you want to make sure this bolt is centered to your little piston. So I just screw this thing out a little bit and then line it up with the hole in my piston and then go down like that so I know it's center. So I'll go through, weld this thing on, and then we can get to heating this thing up. Alright, so we have our tube here full of sand. I've got the ends welded on. Now, all we want to do, we want to compact this sand a little bit. Now, we just want to do sort of, you just tap it on the ground like that, and you just want to screw this in just hand tight. You don't want to go putting a rattle gun on this and putting heaps and heaps of pressure in the pipe, because when you heat it up, the sand will actually expand the pipe and then it won't be the right size anymore. And I know this because I've already done this and that's what happened to me. So we just want to compress it like that, just use the weight of it to hit the ground and just keep tightening it up with your hand. So I'm doing it over here because this is the hardest part of the slab. If I did it like right in the middle, it'd probably make a really hollow sound, wouldn't be as hard. So find the sturdiest bit of your slab to do this on. Alright, so this thing's not moving anymore. So this thing is ready to put in the furnace now, and we will start heating it up. Alright, so when I'm heating this thing up, make sure I got my gas on. When I'm going to bend this thing, right, I want to bend this in sections. I've found with trial and error, doing all the hard work that you don't have to, I found that if I try and heat too much and bend too much at a time, the bit that I'm not up to bending yet cools down, and sort of the first bit bends really nice, and then the bit after that's not as nice. So I'm going to take a few bites at this. I'm going to just heat up this first sort of, I don't know, 4 inches or 6 inches, and then bend a little bit, put it back, bend a little bit, put it back. So I've made my kiln or my furnace here wide enough so that when it's a little bit bent, I can still put it in there. So let's get to heating this thing up, eh? So it's been in there for a few minutes, but still not the color I want. Last one, I reckon. Oh, come on. This one at 90-ish. There we have it. Not bad. Alright, so my pipe here has cooled down. I've taken the sand out of it. I've lopped it off. Still capped on the end, but I just wanted to show you on this one, I think my gas bottle is slowly running out of gas, so it's not as hot as it used to be. So the other couple that I did were pretty nice, and this one still has a little ripple in it. I don't know if you can see that, but I just want to show you how we can fix this. So it's, nothing's perfect. You're never going to do a perfect job. These things, if you did like 100 of them, you'd probably get a couple of really nice ones, but I'm just going to make do with what I've got here, and I'm going to show you how to fix this. So I just got, this is the little holder out of my bending jig. Now the reason I'm going to use this is because it's got a radius on the bottom that's the same as what this is. So I want to go through and heat up this little ripple, and I want to go through and tap it back to the right shape. So I'm going to tap it back in so we've got a nice uniform bend here without the ripple in it. So basically I'm going to sit it in this like we said. If I wasn't sitting in this, when I hit it, it would just put a flat dent on the bottom of it. So if you put it in something that's the same radius, you're not going to end up with just a dent in the bottom on the opposite side of where you're hitting it. So basically I want to do that, and I want to put a bit of heat into it. Just because if we have a little bit of heat in that sort of area there, hopefully it'll go in and leave the rest alone. So let's fucking see what that does. Right, so that's pretty well it. You know, a few minutes beating on that, bit of heat, gets that ripple out of there. You know, once I'm gonna weld all this exhaust together, and then I'm gonna go over it with a heap of different grits, trying to polish all the welds out and grind everything out. So I can go over all this, make it super smooth, and you won't even know that I did that. So I just wanted to show you that, you know, it's not a perfect weld. You're gonna have stuff like that happen. You know, this is 316, it's good shit. It'd be a pain to throw this out and just have to start again because you got a little ripple in there. So like I said, this is done now. So I've bent all my bends for this now. Now we're gonna start piecing an exhaust together. All right, so now that we have fabricated the most annoying part, which was these large radius stainless steel bends, we're gonna need a few other things to fabricate this exhaust, and then we're gonna be ready to go. So basically, to start with, this front pipe has a super sharp bend coming straight out of it to miss the down tube of the frame. So you're gonna need a tight radius bend just to do that top bit. Now you can buy these, I think they're like an 85 or a 90 millimeter radius bend. You can just buy these, so don't stress yourself and try and bend it the way I did, just buy this guy. So he's gonna go up in there, that's gonna be the tight radius that is gonna shoot down to probably this guy. I'm gonna have him there, we're gonna cut that and then have a straight. So that'll go to that. So as I said, I have two pipes that I'm gonna use, two of the large radius that we bent. So we're gonna use one here, and we're gonna use obviously one out of this rear pipe. That is just gonna go sort of like that. And that's gonna give us that nice sweeping look that we're going for. And then it'll just go straight up to an upsweep. So that's all the bends you're gonna need. You're obviously gonna need some straight as well. I just got this. This is like a high polished 316 inch and 3/4 pipe. If you get the high polish, you know, it's just way less work when it comes to actually polishing these things. You only have to take the welds out and then just lightly go over it. And then when you put this thing through the buff, it's gonna come up super nice and shiny. So you probably need like 3 meters or so of the straight to make this happen. I used about 2 meters making those bends. So you probably use a whole length by the end of it, and it's not cheap, but you know, you get a good, well, you know, maintained exhaust out of it. You know, you can cut it up as many times as you want, as I mentioned before. You know, you can change this thing every second weekend if you want. It doesn't matter. It's not like chrome. You don't have to go and get it chromed again. You're just going to weld it up, polish your welds, polish it, it's done. So the last thing you're going to need for this exhaust is exhaust flanges. Now, I sell these exhaust flanges on my web store. If you guys haven't been over there, jump over and have a look. Heaps of cheap stuff there, way easier than trying to make it yourself. Just buy it from me, would ya? So these exhaust flanges, I've designed these flanges to work with the normal clip style and the flange like the original style exhaust is. They just have like a radius and then a clip behind it, and then this flange goes behind the clip and that holds it into the head. But I like to make them a bit different, make them a bit more positive contact. So I'm going to show you what I do with these, but basically we can't do anything until we do these. You want to have your start point and then work out to your end point. Because your end point can always change a little bit, but your start point always has to be the same because you come straight out of the exhaust. So let's go ahead. I'm going to show you what modifications I do to these to make them really well fit and don't leak at all. And then we can get back to cutting up some pipe and welding it together. All right, so what I have here is just a bit of like shed 80, like thick wall stainless steel pipe. And what I'm gonna do with that, I've taken one of the flanges and I have put it on the motor here, and I've put the bolts on so I have plenty of thread on there. So that's sort of where I want it to tighten up. And then we'll go in here and we'll measure this. So I'm measuring from the seal to the center of the flange. So that's like 15-ish mil. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to machine this thick wall so that it just nips inside that with a shoulder, so that that'll sit like that, and I'm going to have it, whatever I just measured, 10 mil off here, so that it welds on the inside, and then we can just bolt this guy in there, and that'll push hard up on the gasket. We can bolt that on, and then when we come and do our exhaust, we can just stab it in the flange like that, and then we can tack it on in a desired location. So I'm going to go through, I'll machine up these pieces and show you in a bit more detail when I've done it. So here are the little spigots I was talking about. So I've just got a shoulder on this so that it slips into my flange like that. And I've basically machined the outside of this to just be smaller than the actual casting size, so that it sits in there like that, and it has a huge footprint on the exhaust gasket, making it impossible for this thing to leak, and it doesn't like move around and bend side to side like a round taper original style would. So that guy, like I said, just sits in the flange like that, and then the exhaust pipe, when you come to weld it on, just slips inside like that. So it's all one piece, all welded together. So let's see if I can pull this off one-handed and put that in there like that. Perfect. So that's gonna be how it sits. So I'm gonna fabricate this guy and then bolt it in. And then when I come to do the exhaust, like I said, slip that in that, tack it where you want it, and weld it out, and it's done. So let's go ahead and weld these guys up and then bolt them into the engine. All right, so a couple tricks when we are welding these guys together. Basically, because we're going to be putting a weld right here and it's quite thin here, we are going to bend this flange and make it like a banana. So what we want to do, we just want to get two of our little vice grips like this and just put it on the bit that you are worried about bending. So you just put it on both of these bits like that. I'm worried about those guys bending, so put that on there flat like that, and that will stop the two edges from bending because you're clamping it to something solid, stopping it from pulling it up. So before we do that though, let's tack this guy on. So what I was going to do, I was just going to put this on there like that, and then have my other guy here. This is making sure that it stays flat when I tack it. Sometimes when you tack these things, if you put a nice hot tack on one side, it'll lift the other side, and you might not know, and you'll go and tack it, and then when you weld it, it'll be on the piss. So let's go ahead and we will just tack this. I've got this at about 120 amps and like 1 pulse per second. So let's see what happens. Yep, plenty hot enough. You know, you're not welding down a building or something. You're basically just sealing this, because if you didn't have this weld around here, you know, you might get exhaust coming around it. So basically this is just holding it on, so you don't have to go super crazy on this. So the other thing to take note is which side you weld this on. So stainless steel's always got a nice side and then a rough side. So if you want the nice side out, make sure the rough side is towards this. So I'm just going to tack this up, and then I'm just going to time lapse me welding this thing out. Tack this guy up first. $120 amps seems like plenty of heat. So I have my exhaust flanges bolted in. I've got them in nice and tight how I'm gonna run them, because if you were to put them in loose, you know, maybe the exhaust gasket crushes a bit, and then all the work you've put into lining up all your pipes might be off because your exhaust flange wasn't in the right spot. So go ahead and tighten them up to how you would tighten them up, you know, when the exhaust is on there. So they won't move now. So basically what we got to do now is start nutting out this exhaust. Start working out what bends go where to cut stuff, and you know, all that sort of stuff. So basically you want to work out, you want to start with one exhaust. Like, you don't want to try and just do both at the same time and work them out. You want to do one and then mimic it with the other one. So basically the exhaust that Freddie's going for here is just your sort of normal up sweeps. He doesn't want the pipes super high. He sort of wants them, you know, a bit lower. 9 times out of 10 when you do up sweeps, you follow this rear angle of this bottom tube here. So because of that, I reckon we start on the front pipe. And I always like to start on the most difficult, because then you pull your hair out doing that, and then the next one is easy. So I reckon we start on the front pipe, and then we do this angle and then get the pipe to how long we want it, and then we can just mimic that angle with the rear pipe. Also, you want to take into account sort of where they are this direction as well. Sometimes people like them super lined up. I like them a little bit staggered, so it's like it sort of comes in on an angle. I don't like it too square, it makes the bike look really wide. So basically how we're going to sort out this front pipe. I'm lucky, I've done this a few times. I have a heap of offcuts here, just, you know, bends that I have cut for other pipes that I have left over. So I can trial and error these things and sort of work out where I want to be. But so we sort of have to work out where this pipe's going to be to work out what this angle is going to be. So basically that pipe is going to live there. So I'm going to have this nice radius in here going around the cone, and then this flat piece I can sort of line up and get that dead flat. So this one's obviously going to get cut somewhere here so that the pipe goes straight into this pipe. So what we want to do is, we know the pipe has got to shoot in this direction. So as I said, I've just got a few little offcuts here. And obviously the cut needs to be more than that. It needs to be facing down this direction. So by looking at that, I'm going to need almost this whole bend. So as anything, you can always take material away. You can't put it back very easily. You have to weld the piece back on, or throw away your bend and start on another one. So you just kind of want to, I just want to start with a bit of an angle like this. So I've spoken about this in another video, how to cut this. So when you come to cut this, you want to cut it straight with the intersection of the radius. So the radius of this is like 90 mil. So you want to cut it as it intersects, because then you've got a perfectly round bit of steel when you're done. If you cut it on the piss like this, you're going to have a weird oval shaped pipe. So the way I've showed you this before in one of my previous videos, you can put this on a piece of paper, mark the radiuses, and then mark the center, and then you can just put a little bit of pipe or like a little bit of TIG wire from the center and do this with it. And then you can mark across it, and then you're intersecting the radius of the bend properly. So I've done this a few times. I can just sort of guess it, and then you can fix it up on your little linisher. No big deal. You don't notice it when you get to the end, so don't be too anal about it. So I sort of want to go somewhere there. I reckon that's going to be pretty close to what we're chasing. And if there's any issue with that, I can always take a little bit off. So I think I just want to start with that. Just trying to work this angle out a bit better. Does that look all right? That looks pretty all right. So I'm going to go ahead and cut this, and then we will come back and see how we did. So I've showed you this before. I don't use the vise or anything like that. As long as you hold it, you don't go too crazy with this, it'll be fine. Alright, so I have this one cut now. Whenever you cut it, I always use a drop saw to cut this stuff because you're always going to get a perfectly straight cut. Now, I've had a few people message me about their drop saws and how they don't cut straight. What you want to do, buy a fucking cheap drop saw, but then buy the expensive blades. The blades are what makes it cut straight. So if you buy yourself a cheap drop saw, put the blade that it comes with in there and it cuts like a freaking 45-degree angle, that's why. Buy yourself good blades and put them in your shit drop saw. Works a trick. So I've cut this pipe now, so we can jam that in here. And the good thing about that is the way I've made the flanges is this pipe pushes in there so you can hold it like that, and then you can set this guy up and sort of work out where he's going to live. Now, the other beauty of doing it like that, I can manipulate this a little bit, and it doesn't matter if I have to come back and, you know, weld up a bit of a gap, or it's not perfectly sitting flat on the piece I've welded inside, doesn't matter. So another upside to that. So I've hit that pretty nicely. I have that angle sort of how I want it. As I said, I've done this a few times. Might take you a few times to do it. Just got to have a bit of patience when you do this stuff because it really does pay off in the end. Looks fucking schmick if you take your time, do it nicely, make sure the bends line up nicely, make sure your cuts are in the right radius. Really makes a huge difference when it comes to finishing it, and it looks really nice, flows really well, everything works. So now that we sort of have that where we want it, we want to go ahead and start with our next piece. So we've sort of got to cut this piece, intersect the radius in the right spot so that this will go straight up into it. Now, I'm already seeing that I might have to change this, take a little bit of angle out of this so that it shoots sort of out when it comes into it, but that's all right, I can do that. But just to give us some sort of idea of where it's going to end up, you want to just have it in there like that, and then jam this here. So I sort of want it, so another way you can do this, just to make it easy for yourself, you can put some bits of timber or something on the bench and you can sit this on it, so every time you put it on there, it's going to be perfectly level. But my frame is not really level to the bench, so that's not really going to work for me. So I'm just going to hold it, but it's something you can do at home if you've got a flat frame. So I'm sort of looking here. As I said, you can always take some more off. It's super hard to put it back on. So I'm just sort of gonna hit that there, I reckon. And then that, sort of want it on that angle. You sort of have to line this up as correct as you can get it. That gives you a bit of an idea which direction it's gonna go. And that there, somewhere there, I reckon is gonna be pretty close. So once again, I'll go over to my humble drop saw and cut that there. Alright, so I have the bit cut, I have it linished. I always put it through the linisher. You can always make it a bit flatter on top if you sit it on there. And you'll see when I get closer to finishing this, you put it in the linisher and you can just manipulate the angle a little bit, and that's really handy sometimes. So, oh yeah. So I need to take a little bit more there, but I am on the right track. So, as I said, easy to take it away, much harder to put it back. So I'm going to go through, cut that a little bit more, and then I'll do some fiddling around with a straight piece in here, change the angle a bit. I'll just time lapse that, I think. You sort of get the idea. and you'll see what I do when I time lapse this, because this is probably the hardest piece. This end bit's easy, it's just a kick. So this is probably the hardest piece in the whole bike. So I'll just go through, give you a time lapse and show you what I end up doing. That little bit more angle on that. So cut her back through there. Alright, you guys just saw in the time lapse, I got this thing pretty well nutted out now. What I did to get myself to this point, it's a little hard to work out where the flat on, one of your radiuses sort of goes straight. So I just cut a bit of pipe, just a bit shorter than what it needs to be, or if you've got an upcut, even better, just so you understand sort of where that angle shoots. So that's all I did, worked out where that angle shoot, and then I just did the top pipe. I just kept taking a bit of material off until it shot in basically the same direction. Now, when you're using your drop saw and you want to just take a little bit off, all I do is I mark the top of the bit of material where I want it to be, and then I just put it in the linisher and linish it to that mark, and then make it flat and make sure it's true in both directions. The reason for that is if you're using the drop saw and you don't take a full cut, it'll sort of take the easy route and then cut this thing on the piss. So if you're only taking a small little bit off like that, just do it in the linisher. Way easier. So now that I have this thing pretty well where I want it, I'm just going to work out what length this straight needs to be, and then I'm going to tack it to this one, and then I will tack it to that one. And then I'll probably tack this to the flange first, and then tack that to that, and then tack that to that, so that it's sort of, you're doing it in a sequence sort of thing. So I'll just put this here, sort of work out where I want this to be, and then just roughly get my tape measure here. Bit longer, as I said, you can always take some off. So us Aussies work in millimeters, so I'm going to cut a piece 180 millimeter, and then I'm going to tack it to this, and then we're going to come back and see if she fits. Alright, so I have my straight piece welded on to my radius now. Now, a little trick with these, you want the gaps as close as possible on these joins. The nicer you have these joined, the less they're going to move when you weld them. So you want these joins super, super nice so that nothing moves when you weld it. The other upside to doing this is when you butt stuff up, you know that it fits properly when it sits down flush on there. If you've got to angle it to one way, you're guessing how big the gap is, and then you'll never get it to fit right. So just do yourself a favor, spend the extra time and get this to meet up nicely. So next step, I just want to chuck this on here and then make sure this guy is pushed into my little flange all the way home so that I can mark it, and then I'm going to take the flange off, and then I'm going to tack that to the flange. But I'm only going to do that when I know it's in the right spot. So as I said, that's a nice finish there. So I can put that on there like that. And that seems to fit pretty nicely. But just want to bend this just a little bit like that. Just want to make this fit a bit better. So I want to come out a bit. I'm hitting these bolts here, so I just want to pop this out a bit, just like that. Right, that looks pretty good. We are in the ballpark there. So that lines up nice. Nice and tucked up. It's not going to have to worry about this thing hitting anything. I'm not going to worry about when you put your foot down, you burn it on the side of this. It's tucked up in there nicely. So I think I'm going to go with that. That is freaking it. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to put a little mark, 2 marks on the pipe and then onto the flange, so that when I unbolt this, I can tell if it's moved. And then obviously you're not going to weld on something that's moved. So I'm going to go through, tack that up, and then we're going to sit it back on there and make sure that this piece still fits before we weld that to that. Alright, so here is the flange and the first bend. As I said, I've just got a couple of nice little tacks on that, just so it doesn't move when we put this thing together. So let's go ahead and put that up in here. Now we're going to have to pull this off in a second to weld the other piece on, so I'm not going to go too crazy doing this up. Remember, there will be a little bit of movement in your flange, so you just got to remember to put it back in somewhere close to the same position, because you do have, see how much movement you have there? So I'm probably just going to leave it a little bit loose like that, so I can manipulate it if I want, and then I'm going to put this in here like that. So which way does this move? It needs to be up like that. Alright, so that's the spot I wanted in. Lock it there. Cool. So now I'm going to set this up and have a look down it and make sure the pipe is going parallel with the frame. Somewhere there, the pipe is parallel with the frame. Now I don't like that, so let's take this off again. Just angle that down a wee bit. Just sitting a bit high for my liking. Hitting back there. And this is all the things you have to do when you do a custom exhaust. Play with all of this stuff. So somewhere there, let's tighten this back up. And what we're going to do, we're going to put 2 marks on this pipe and to this pipe like we did on the top bit, so that we know which orientation it needs to be welded in. So look down the bitch like that. So we're just going to put 2 marks like that. So when I take both these off, I know where they go like this, and then we can weld it together. So I'm going to go ahead, pack that stuff together and put it back on and see how we did. Alright, so here's the bit tacked up. As you just saw, I just put a little quick time lapse in there. How I tack that up. Once again, you want to get this thing as close as you can to the other bit. The best fit you can. It's going to make your life way easier in the long run. So let's slap this thing on, tighten it up, see where it sort of ends up. As I said, we have a bit of, we can manipulate it a little bit in this flange. So I'm just going to just sort of knead it up, and then work out where it sits the best. Work out where it wants to live. Yep. Not sure if I've nailed that, but tighten this up. Yeah, I haven't nailed that. So once again, like I'm showing you in real time how this works. You know, everyone's going to have mistakes. I think I've just welded this thing on a little bit crooked. It's really not very parallel with the frame, so it needs to come in a little bit here. It's not overly parallel, which I don't like. So I'm going to have to cut this off here, and I just need to tweak a little bit so that this end goes in a little bit. So I'm going to go through that, I'm going to get this right, and then we will come back to the next bit where we are doing this radius here. Right, so I was able to do a bit of tweaking here, and this is the pros of just tacking all this stuff. I was able to lock that up and just tweak this a little bit, just bend it here and there, and it turned out how I wanted it. So see now that thing is nice and parallel with the frame. Sits under here nicely, nice and parallel. Doesn't hit anything. It's a bit close to that, but I've got a bit of shielding I can put on that. That's no big deal. Misses everything down there. So that's all sweet now. So I'm going to start looking at this bend here. Now, I think I want to do it in a large radius again. I'm not quite sure. I'm going to have a bit of a play around here. I'm going to just like mock this top pipe up. Just see how this looks with a large radius. It might be too much, I'm not sure. So I'm just gonna have a play around and see what I wanna do. Alright, after a bit of mucking around, I sort of worked out that I want to run the larger radius because it's such a small piece, you don't really notice anyway. So I went through all the effort to make it, I might as well use it. So I just cut up a random bit that this is just like an offcut of something that I tried to bend, obviously didn't work very well, one of the originals. So I just used the piece that I cut, where the hell I put that, over there. I just used that piece to work out how much I needed of a good piece that I had. And then we're going to work out, I just lopped off, I had like a bit of a daggy bit that I welded an end cap on when I was bending this. So I just cut that off because I need to put another straight bit on here. So to work out how long that needs to be, I needed that to be a nice bit of pipe. So of course I lost my freaking tape measure. Bear with me, I've got it. So we basically just need to work out how long this bit's going to be, and then we weld that on, and then we can adjust this angle and then work out how long the bit out the back's going to be. So basically I'm just going to do what we did before, line that up sort of where it's going to be. I want it to come up sort of underneath the, it's a bit far out, you probably won't notice it anyway. Oh, I wonder if I could cover up the brake with that a bit. Nah, fuck that. Anyway, I'm just going to put it sort of in line. Obviously, I'm going to follow the line of this bottom tube. And I'm just going to put it in line like that. I want it somewhere there. So, what's the bet? This is 180 again, or 150. So, I'm going to add 150 bit of straight onto that. And then I'm going to go through and cut this to where it needs to be, and then work out how long the piece off the back needs to be. So I'm going to go through, cut that, weld that on, and then we'll come back when I'm cutting this and working this out. Alright, so I cut my little bit here. I ended up going a bit shorter because I didn't want this upsweep to be too far back. I sort of want it on the front side of this bottom tube. So I went with like a 120. So I have that on there, and I've cut this pretty close to the right angle, so that'll go on there like that, and then that guy will go there. And then this is sort of what I was thinking with this long bit at the back here. It's sort of about that length. Freddie didn't want it too long. I had Fraser's, that blue Evo, it was heaps longer. I don't think Freddie's too keen on that, so I'm just going to go this shorter route because the top pipe is longer than this one anyway. So we'll go further as well, so he wasn't real too keen on that. So the way I'm going to do this, I'm going to weld this straight onto here like that, and then I'm going to weld this straight onto my bend. That way this will be positioned there, and this will be like that, and I can fix up this angle like because it'll just be one piece then. So if I need to, I'll chuck this on the liner shirt. I can take a little bit off top or bottom to change the angle, and then we'll mark it like we did the other side and then tack it on. So she will live somewhere like that. So I'll show you a little trick with welding a straight piece to a straight piece. Alright, so I'm up here at my bench with all my little bits of straight that I need to weld together. So basically, to make this easy and to make sure that you get these pieces straight, you know, after you weld it together and buff it, you might have a straight piece that has a big cock in it. So this is how you get your pipe straight so you don't have that. So basically you just need something that's dead straight with a valley in it. Now, it can be like a bit of angle, a bit of fucking just off-cut plate that I have here. But anyway, it just sits in the valley like that, you clamp it there, and that makes it dead straight to your other piece. So I'm just going to go through, get my long bit, and I'm going to clamp it in there so it doesn't move on me, because this one has been wanting to move. Just like that. It's really, be nice if this had a bigger flange, but this is what I got to work with. So basically we're just gonna clamp him like that, get my other piece, and because I've just cut this in the drop saw, your ends are not gonna be perfect. So I just put it in there, try and find the best one, try and find the best position, which is there. Now this time I'm gonna put the earth on here, because I did this before in the last take, and it shocked the absolute fuck out of me. And tack her up. Oh, you fucking cunt. Might play it if you're lucky. So I'm going to put the earth on here this time so that I don't get zapped to shit again. And then we'll tack this thing up straight. I'll be fucking pissed if this zaps me. This machine has a high frequency start, so if you don't have an earth or a good earth when you try and start it, the arc goes through you and it fucking hurts. So that's that one. I'll just finish off welding this, and then I'll go to the other one and repeat the process. Alright, so I have my front pipe. I welded on this little extension here. I also welded on the large extension for the bend. I went through and just touched up on the liner shirt. Just needed a little bit taken off the bottom, but the angle is perfect now. I like the position it's in. So what we're going to do, we're going to go ahead and put some marks on this in the right position to weld it. So we want to make sure this thing's straight, which is basically the main thing here. So if you weld it on the piece, you're going to see it from a mile away. So I'm just going to play around with this a little bit. see if I can rest it on my shoulder or something to get the width. So somewhere here is where I want it. So just like we did on the flange, put 2 marks there, or 3 if you want to go crazy. And that is where we want this thing to be. So just do this in a different position. See how we're looking. You know what? I don't think that's right. Has to go in a little bit. So lucky you can just rub this off. I wonder if I can hold it with my foot. Doesn't matter how you get there. Doesn't matter how you do it, as long as you bloody do it. Look at that. The old fucking van coming through with the goods. So somewhere there we want it. But what I might do with this, I might just put one good tack on the top, and then I can move it around a bit and make it spot on. And then I'll come through and I'll put the rest of the tacks on, I think. So pull this front pipe off again. I'm going to tack this and then we're going to come back and we're going to see how I went. Right, so here's first looks at it. I have this pipe just tacked on. I didn't quite get it, but I'll explain why. It doesn't really matter in a second. So as you can see, it comes down, follows the frame nicely, shoots out the back. I like it when this part of the pipe here is sort of down a bit from the frame. I feel like it gives the false sense that the frame's a bit more raked up, which is a pretty cool little chopper look. So that's why that is not perfectly level with the frame. I like it like that. And then the back kicks up and you can see it's perfectly level with the frame there, in line with it. So, as I said, I didn't quite get this part right. See, I've got it straight there, but it's because I've got this manipulated here. This is not perfectly lined up. But that doesn't matter because I'm going to pull it apart anyway when I weld it. You'll find because there's so many little bits in this, when I go around and weld these all up, it's going to move a little bit. So, if you try and weld it all at once, when you put it on, it's 9 times out of 10 not going to be perfectly right. So I like to weld this front bit on and then leave that till all this is welded and finished, and then weld these last ones on. And then you'll make sure the pipes are perfectly in the right spot when you're finished. So I'm going to leave that one like that, and then I'm going to do the rear pipe and make it obviously the same angle as that bottom pipe, just a little bit higher. I'm hoping it's sort of, depending on how that bend goes, I'm hoping it's sort of not in line with the number plate. Cops get a little bit pissed off when they can't see the number plate from the angle. So we'll see how it goes, but I'm going to go on to starting to muck around with the rear pipe now. But you can see it looks pretty sweet with those large radius bends in it. Right, so now that we have this angle sorted, we have something to follow for the rear pipe or the top pipe. So I sort of just want to play around a bit with this bend here and sort of work out where I want this thing to live. Like, I can put the bend straight in the head, but like, look how, once again, it helps if you've got another straight piece to chuck on the end. So look where it, that's not cut very well, is it? Look how high it sort of comes up. So it comes up super high and will intersect the number plate like I said I didn't want. So I think the only way we're going to fix that is if we put a straight bit on the end of this. The longer we make that straight, the further this comes out and the lower it's going to go. So I think I want it, I'm just going to put a straight piece on the end of this just to see what it looks like. I also want the pipe to sort of follow the oil bag a bit. So I'm not exactly sure how that's going to go yet, but that's sort of how far I want it. So what's that? 50 mil. 2 inches for you Americans. Is that enough? I reckon we go with that, because that should bring the pipe hopefully just below the number plate and then bring these pretty close. So I'll cut a 50 mil bit, I'll put it on that, we'll stick it in there and we'll see what it looks like. Have my little 50 mil welded on now. I'm just going to see if this thing will sort of hold itself in. Oh, it might do. Come on, bro. Yes, it's doing it. So, because that's a nice fit, I can hold it there. Sort of work out what needs to happen here. I want it a nice, like, even gap around the oil bag here. Make it look nice from the top. Has that nice sweep from the side, so it's doing all the right things. So I've just got to work out 2 things. Where I'm going to cut this so that the angle's right this direction and right for the same angle. Oh, dog. So that's going to be the hard part of all this, working out those angles. Stay there, please. So just from looking at this, I think that 50 mil bit that I put in there might be a bit long, but that's alright. I can shorten that. So I think I'm going to leave that for now and then just do this stuff and then shorten that last, because that'll give us, it's a bit far out this way, so shortening that will bring everything a little bit closer and in more, so it's in line with this part. So what I'm going to do here, somewhere here is where it wants to be. I'm going to say just here somewhere, just by looking at it. Cut that somewhere there. It's a bit further on here actually. Looks like it needs to be about there from the top. And then like that. So that line is basically a right angle from this. If you really wanted to go crazy, you get yourself a square. You hobble over here to get a square. You could just cop a square like this, go like that on there, and then you know that this is your angle. So I was pretty fucking close, if I may add. So that there, and then across the top there. That is sort of the angle we want. And then what I'm going to do while I'm there, because it's easy to put the straight pipe on there to work out your angle, I'm going to work out what this needs to be. Obviously we want to cut this long as well, so we can always shorten it. I'm not sure what he's going to like. I'm going to go 900. That's like fucking out here. The other thing I like is the pipes being level with the ends of the pipes being square. So 900's a bit longer. I'm gonna do a bit of a slash cut on these down, I think. So let's start with cutting this. I'm gonna cut this extension and then we're gonna come back and see how we did. Alright, so I think this is going to be too hard for me to hold because I don't think this thing is going to want to sort of stay in there. I'm pretty close with that. I think I might just need to take a little bit. As I said, this is a bit long, so I'm just going to line it up as best I can, and then once I've got the long pipe tacked to this, I will take the length off here to bring it in level with the bottom pipe. So this one is sort of where you need another set of hands, but I don't freaking have that. So that's sort of where that needs to be. It needs to kick up a little bit. So I'm just going to go to the linisher. I'm going to kick this bit. I'm going to put a mark there. Linish that a bit more angle up, and then I'm not sure. I might just tack this and then bring my welder over here, and then when it's in the right spot, I'll put a tack in there, and then I can pull the whole thing off, tack it nicely on each, put it back on and hope for the best. So I'll do a bit of fiddling with this and then we'll come back and have a look at it. Alright, so I got a bit proactive with this and I just tacked the long piece to my bend after I just fixed it up a little bit. And now we sort of we've got the right angle this way and we just need to change the angle this way. So I figure the way that I'm going to work out this angle is I'm going to mark the pipe on the flange in here on the head. Then I'm going to take it over to my bench and I'm going to put a big tack on it. Something that'll hold when I put it back in here and then manipulate it a bit. And then hopefully I can just come in here and put a little tack in another spot and that's going to hold it where we want it. So what I'm going to do here, I want to work out what depth we have to change. So how much we've got to take off this end bit to make these pipes in line or however you want them. So I'm just going to line this pipe up this direction so that it's in line with the pipe this direction. So I'm going to take the material off that way, so I'm just going to measure it like this. So I think I want to take, like I said, easy to take off, you don't want to take off too much. So just looking at that, it says like 30 mil there, so I'm going to take off 20 and see what it looks like. So I'll go ahead and cut this. Right, so I got 20 mil off this thing. Of course I've already tried it up here and it lines up super nice. Like the radius around the oil bag here is spot on. So that's where it's going to stay. Now I've just got to work out where the hell to mark it on the flange in there. So like I said, another set of hands would be nice. Another way you can do it, you can pack stuff between here and then clamp it together. But remember, I don't have this welded up and I'm going to weld the front pipe separately. And this is why. So the rear pipe only has 2 welds in it, right? So that's going to be stiff as hell. So what we're going to do, we're going to weld this up, put it on, and then we're just going to match this pipe with this pipe when we come to weld it up. So that makes it super easy. You don't have to try and get them to both line up the same. You just copy the bottom one from the top one. Makes it super easy. So, like I said, I'm going to line this up as best I can and just going to put a tack on a mark on the flange, and then I'm going to put a big tack on it. And that will give us the ability to put this back on and then move it around where we want it. So I have a feeling it needs to come out like that, but that's alright. Alright, so this is it tacked on. This is literally straight off the welder. I just put that little tack on there. It's probably like 5 mil or so, but it's enough to hold the pipe where I want it and then we can manipulate it. So we look down it this way. You can see it's on the piss, so we can just move this a bit. Manipulate it like that. See, that's in line now. Look this way. See this, so this side needs to go up a bit. So same thing, we just grab this, move that up a bit like that. And then we just keep messing around like that. See, that's getting closer and closer there. So, am I breaking that tack? Oh no, it's just moving pretty easy. So, a little bit more. I'm not sure if it's going to move because of that tack there, but you get the idea. So that is, see, it's all lined up down there like that. They're both in line. I've got this nice gap that I was talking about around the oil bag. It's exactly the look I was going for. So this is pretty well all sorted now. So all I'm going to do now, I'm just going to keep messing with this rear pipe to get it a bit closer to this one. So I'm going to put another tack on it down here on the flange, get that a bit closer, and when that's done, we're pretty well ready to weld this stuff out. Like, I'm not going to cut, I'm going to put a slash cut on the ends of these, but I'm not going to do that until very last because like I said, these pipes are going to move and do all sorts of shit while I weld them. So the other thing I'm going to do when I weld these, I'm going to internally purge them. And I'll show you why we do that in a sec when I've finished playing with these things. Righto, so I pretty well have this thing dialed now. I've had this flange off 2 or 3 times now, just tweaking it and tacking it in different places. That's just what you got to do, but you know, they're dead in line now. You can see they're dead straight beside each other. They're pretty close to... Remember I was saying I didn't really want this to intersect the number plate too badly. Now, it is intersecting it a bit, but it kind of has to do with this bottom pipe. So, as I said, there's a bit of movement in the flange, so this can come down a bit yet. But like I said, I'm going to take these pipes off now. We're going to weld them out, and then we will start buffing them and polishing them and all that. But we want to start on the rear pipe, and that's because we'll weld this thing completely out, and then we will buff the welds out roughly, and then we will bolt it back on here, and then we will start on the bottom pipe. And that's because we need to change this angle for this last one here to match the top. So we'll just weld the front piece out, we'll buff the welds out, and then we'll do this last one here where the bend is. And then we'll match it, then it'll look sweet, everything will work. And then once we have them welded out where they want to be, we will start doing some mounts off the pipe to the sissy bar. So I've got some clamps that we'll use. So it'll just clamp the pipe, and then I'll just make a tab that goes to the sissy bar. Sure, you could weld a tab onto the sissy bar and then to the pipe and then to the sissy bar, but then that's a break point. You want to have a crush, like a crush flange, like you usually do on your pipes. So a nice clamp on there around it, and then it goes to a tab. That'll stop any cracking, because obviously these things vibrate like hell. So that'll stop that from cracking and breaking in the future. Because this is stainless, it is brittle, doesn't like vibration, but that is why we're going to internally purge these welds and then buff them out. I'll show you why in a second. So I'm going to take the rear pipe off, and then we'll start working out what we're going to do to weld it. Alright, so I have my rear pipe off here, and I just wanted to go through what steps we're going to take now with this thing. Basically, we need to weld it out, and then we need to use this pipe to copy the front pipe. So what we want to do, we want to completely weld this out, and then we want to buff all these welds off and make it seamless before we do that. We do that because whenever you add heat, take some material away, add material, anything, this pipe will move to some degree because it's so thin. So we want to get this to almost finished condition, put it on the bike, and then copy with the front pipe. But I just wanted to go through and have a chat about the internally purging that I was talking about. So you're going to need a few extra little bits from your little welding shop before you can do this. So basically you just need a T, and that goes on your regulator, and then you have another regulator beside it, and this regulator regulates through your pipe into the pipe, so that's how much gas you're putting into the pipe, and then your other regulator will regulate how much gas is going to your TIG torch. Now, I've already spoke about this and gave you a demonstration in another video, so I'm going to add that here, and you can watch that while I set all this shit up. Alright, so this is my little test piece. So this, I've cut this in half now, but this used to be a straight piece that I just cut in half, and I made this little thing just to show you the difference. So I've welded half without gas and half with gas. So when I cut it in half, you can see the difference. So this side you can see I've welded without gas, and this side I've welded with gas. Now see the difference? See how this guy is not fused at all and it's just porosity and stuff? Where this is the one I've shielded with gas, and there's a weld on the inside and the outside at the same time. And that's what we want, because we're going to be taking this weld off the outside. So if you've just done this and then you take the weld off the outside, it's just going to break because there's no weld on the inside. So that is how you get a weld on the inside of this pipe all the way up here. So I'll show you how we're going to set this up and what to do, but that is the desired outcome. Alright, let's have a quick run through of this regulator setup. So this is the T we spoke about. So we have a regulator coming out of the bottle, and then into the T we have another regulator which goes to the inside of our pipe, and then the other side which goes through goes to the machine. So because we're putting gas in here, we need to make a hole on the other side. So all you do, you just get your TIG and you just pop a hole in there like that. Just a nice little hole like that, that's all it needs. And then we want to start purging this. So you need to put gas into the pipe and then purge your machine and make sure that the TIG has enough gas. So let's just turn this thing on. We'll purge the machine first. So with my machine, I just press that. And then we will slowly add some gas here. So you can see the ball move there. So we want to run like 2 or 3 liters a minute through the pipe as well. So I'm going to put that to 4 there. So when both regulators are on, making sure the TIG has enough gas. So the TIG still has whatever 6 to 10 liters a minute there. So that's good. And the pipe has whatever 2 to 3 liters a minute going in it. And what you want to do to test that you got gas coming through, you just spit on your finger and then put it here beside your holes. And you should feel nice and cold. And that tells you that you got gas coming through there. So this is all set up now. I'm ready to weld this. I'm going to weld it at 60 to 70 amps. And that's sort of depending on how much filler rod you put in. So just remember, you're going to have to buff all this flat. So just watch how much filler rod you put in because you're going to be buffing it off later. You want to put just the minimum amount so you don't have to buff as much off later. So I'll time lapse this. I'll go through and weld this guy now. Sweet, so that's my pipe all welded up now. As I said, what we have to do next is not the fun part. So we get through and completely linish all these welds out. So I've got a few different grits of sandpaper that I'm going to go through. I'm just going to go over all the welded section in a 60 grit, and then I will come back when we are finishing the pipes up and making them shiny. I'll come back and go over it with some lighter stuff. But because this last section is high polish already, we don't want to go too far into that because that's more area that we're going to have to fix up later. So just want to do the areas you have to, and then we will put this on the bike and then start working out the front pipe, I reckon. Alright, so that is the rear pipe, pretty well buffed up. Whenever I do this, when I see a spot that I'd like to make a bit better, like sure you might have a spot under there but you don't see it, so there's no point in going crazy on it, but you see this one, so I put a little circle around that so I know when I come back and finish it off, that needs a little bit more attention. But that is pretty well it. It come out super schmick. It's actually pretty close to the same level. I'm just going to change that bottom one a little bit when I come to welding it. But thing is in line. It's in the right spot. It has a perfect little gap through here. So super happy with how that turned out. So all I have left to do is to do the front pipe. So what I'm going to do, as I said, I'm going to get rid of this. So I'll just snap this guy off now. Come on. The tack's a bit better than what I thought it was. Come on, bro. So I'm going to take this off like that. I'm going to weld this front half to have that all finished up. And I'll weld this guy as well. And then we will come back and I'll tack that angle on when it's exactly in the right spot. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm just going to time lapse me welding all this out, same way, internally purge it. That one too, I'll buff all the welds flat and get it nice and rough like this one. and then we'll put it back on, do this last bend. Alright, so I have my front pipe bolted on and I have the rear section of it sitting here. Now, I want to mark this a little bit better than what I did before, but I'm thinking of setting this up and tacking it in place so I know it's in exactly the right place. So, if like me, you are by yourself in the shed, tape can be pretty handy for something like this. So we're just going to put that bit of tape there like that. Let's see if I can pull this off. Stay there, bruh. So what we'll do, we'll get a piece of tape here. Put it around here. Put that there. Come on, bro. So tape that on. And then get this to the right angle that you want and use this bit of tape. So that's pretty close. There we go. And then we'll set this up a bit better so that I can get a tack in there. And then she's in position. So what's this look like? Oh yeah, it's pretty close. So I might just do this a bit differently. Piece underneath so that we can weld the top, I reckon. Just like that. One more. Stay there, bro. One more bit. Alright, so I'm going to get me welded together. And I'm going to set this up a bit nicer and then tack it in position so we know it's going to be right when we come back with this thing welded out. Fucker. Right, so I got this thing set up a bit better. I ended up just utilising this little scissor jack I had laying around. Whatever you use to make it happen, doesn't really matter as long as it happens. So I'm just going to use that. I'm going to give this a... This is like just the end of my TIG torch, so try not to pull my machine off the depths. Sweet. So you find with this tape, because it's hanging, it actually hangs this pipe perfectly in line with the top pipe. So really handy way of doing it. And like I said, sometimes you've got to tack this stuff in position. It's the only way you're going to get it nice and straight. So I'm going to go through, tack this up the rest, and then we'll pull it off and weld it. Alright, so this is pretty well it. This is a custom exhaust from scratch, I suppose. The only thing left to do is to mount them. So I'm just going to mount both pipes straight off the back here. You know, sometimes people like to put a mid-mount on these longer front pipes, but I don't think there's any need really. Sometimes that bit of vibration in the middle helps it from cracking up like in other places. If it's too rigid, it's just going to make it crack. So I always just do one mount off the back, and that seems to be pretty sufficient for all the bikes that I've done. So, as I said, you don't want to be having a welded connection to the rear of these pipes because they vibrate so much. A welded connection is just going to be a stress point, and that's going to be where it breaks. So you always want to have fucking Aussies. You always want to have a bolted connection. So I've just bought some little exhaust clamps here from a reputable company. Starts with low, ends in brow. Here I am plugging them again. I'm not getting paid, so if you're watching low brow, hit me up. So you want to just use some bolted connections like this. So obviously I'm going to have one somewhere here, and again I don't want to weld to the sissy bar. I'm going to put a bolted connection through. So I'm just going to make 2 bits of stainless. So I'm just going to have this one somewhere here, and I'm just going to have it go straight, and then it's going to have a little tab on it, and I can bolt straight through it. And exactly the same for the bottom pipe. I'm just going to have it come down. I'm going to have it bolt on the axle plate because I don't like having the mount going up, and there is a bolt right there, but that's way too close. Makes it real, fiddly and annoying. So I'm just going to do it off the bottom of the axle plate there. That's usually where I do it, and that is plenty strong. So once again, you want to do one pipe before the other because this top pipe still has some movement like that. So I've got my bottom pipe pretty rigid. That's where it wants to live. So I'm going to do the bottom first, whack that on there, clamp that, and then I'm going to work out where the top lives. So I'm just going to make it and then move it around to where I like it, clamp it, and then mark it, and then drill it, and then put a bolt through it. Don't tap anything, don't drill and tap because it's just something to come loose. You want a fastener connection, so a bolt and a nut. So I'm going to go through, make that stuff, and then we will come back and final polish is basically all that's left on these pipes then after I finish these. So let's do it. Alright, so these are the stays that I came up with. These are just some like 5mm thick stainless steel, so they're nice and rigid, and I've just got a bolt through the sissy bar and they just bolt on the clamp like that. Same on the bottom, just bolts through the axle plate there at the bottom and then just bolts through the clamp like that. And they are super rigid when they're like that. So as I said, no welded connections, all bolted connections. Alright, so that is pretty well it. I have both my clamps on here, I have my exhaust stays on, they're all tight. This is all super rigid, like see, you don't need a mount in the middle. One at the end is more than sufficient. So basically all there is left to do on this exhaust is buff it and polish it. Now, as I said, most of the exhaust, all the straight parts at least, are all high polish already. So we really only have to focus on the parts we've added and welded. So what you want to do with that, you want to go through and slowly work your way down in grit. So at the moment, I think I'm at a 120 grit. So we want to make our way all the way down to 600. And then after 600, we can just put it through a buff and it'll polish up pretty bright. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to take these pipes off. I'm going to go through and just time lapse me polishing them all. And then I'm also going to take off the guard and the tank and clear them because that's basically the last thing I want to do. I'm going to clear that and then we can put fuel in that and then we can start this thing. I can end off this video with the bike completely running and riding. So let's start pulling this thing apart and get polishing. So I have both front pipe and rear pipe done now. I just did that one off camera because there's not much to it, super quick. Basically, when you are linishing this thing, you want to slowly go down in your grits. So 60 is the roughest, and then we went all the way down to 600, which is the finest, and it is super fine. So you just got to go through every single grit and go through it and really keep an eye on and make sure you get the scratches out from the grit before. That is how you end up with a really nice finish. And then another little trick is, say this is a 600 grit. So you want to go around with a new belt, which is super sharp. You want to go around and get all the bits that really need it. And then you keep your dull belts and then go over the whole thing with the dull belt. So a dull belt might be an 8 or 1,000 grit once it's dulled down. So always keep your dull belts of your high grit like this, and then you can go over and really get a nice finish. But basically, this is what it looks like when you buff these things, all different sizes, all different, sharpness, some are dull, just to get this nice finish. So basically all there is left to do with these pipes is buff them. So I'm just going to go through and time lapse that because it's a terrible process and it's super time consuming, but it makes it look so good. So basically we just have a cutting wheel, some cutting compound, and then a finishing wheel and some finishing compound. I'll probably go over it twice with the cutting wheel and really cut it down and get it super smooth and everything. And then I'll come through with the finisher and just get it super nice and mirror. So you want to push really lightly on this finisher to get the really nice shiny finish. So let's go through and do that now. All right, these are the pipes pretty well all finished up. I will hit these with a bit of metal cleaner and polish when I put them on the bike, just because it'll get rid of some of that wax and stuff that I've put on there that's making it look a bit dull. But basically these are ready to go on the bike. All I have left to do is cut the slash cuts in the end, which I forgot. Probably should have done them earlier, but no big deal. And the other thing I'm gonna do, I'm gonna fill the insides of these with heat resistant paint. Now, the purpose of doing that is so that the heat resistant paint pushes all the heat out the back of the pipe and doesn't collect in the pipe too much, because stainless will decolor a little bit once it's had heat in it. So the idea of that is to stop them decoloring too much and to put all the heat out the back. So, all right, just quickly, I'll show you how I'm gonna cut these exhausts and make sure they are perfectly the same on both pipes. So whenever I do these upsweeps like this, I always like the pipes to be square to the ground so that both cuts finish square to the ground. So if I was to put a square here, you could go straight up and they would be perfectly in line. A quick trick little way to do that is just get your little plumb bob here. It's just a weight on a string, and you can just hold it up like that and see I've got a mark there already. That shows me where it's in line with the bottom pipe. So I'm gonna go ahead and cut that there, cut it flush, just square like this, and then I'm gonna come through and do a slash cut. So I'm gonna slash cut it on my drop saw here because I don't have the vise on here, so I can get a huge angle on there. I just put it up against this bolt that I've got here and you can get a massive angle. The only thing you have to work out so that your slash cut isn't on the piss like this, you just have to find top or have to find square. So an easy way to do that is just get your rule and just make it square on there like that. And then you can just make like a little mark like this. And then just come through, I've got a mark on there. Then you can just come through with your pen like this and mark that like that. So you know that that is square. So when you put it in the drop saw, you just line up that line straight at the top so it's not on the piss, and then it'll be a perfect inline cut. So mark that on both top and bottom pipes, and then we will cut the slash cut, and I'll cut this off. All right, so I have the pipes all finished up. They're slash cut. I've painted the inside, so they are all sorted now, ready to go on the bike. All right, so like I said, you want to clean anything that's going to get super hot. You want to get all the fingerprints and everything off it because they will burn in. So all I use to do that is some acetone. You could probably use some thinners or something as well, but acetone really gets everything off and really makes the stainless or even chrome shine. So give them a good polish up like that. Like I said, anything that gets hot really, get all your fingerprints and stuff off it. So we've got fuel in this thing, we've got oil in this thing, all the wiring's done. There's no reason why this thing shouldn't run. But let's fucking try this thing, eh? Hopefully we got it right this time.